I made 4 videos, and I want to try to wrap all of them up in this one video. The first video is Errol Spence strengths or not Terence Crawford weaknesses. I made 2 of those. The next video would be the reason Errol Spence didn't look like himself. And the final one is Derrick James is extremely overrated. First thing I want to get into is how did we get this wrong? And by we, I don't mean me. I mean, I'm not tooting my own horn. I'm not the boxing Nostradamus or anything like that. I get predictions wrong all the time. I recently got Josh Taylor versus T.O. wrong. So I get predictions wrong. But how did we get this one wrong? It's what I was confused by. When I left YouTube in about 2018, 2019, Terence Crawford was pound for pound. He was still pound for pound at 147. Hypothetically, pound for pound means if all the guys are the same size, this guy beats everybody. So if we can, like we had some Ant-Man technology and we can blow him up to heavyweight, make him 6'6", he beats Tyson Fury and Usyk, right? If we can shrink him all the way down to Inouye's weight, he beats him. To 126, he beats him. No matter where we shrink and expand and shrink and expand, he beats everybody. That's what that means. So with Errol Spence also fighting at 147 and being slightly bigger, I didn't feel like he had a chance. This is about beliefs. This is about, do you believe the facts or do you believe the narratives? That's what this has all boiled down to. And I'll explain. So we're going to take a fighter like Arthur Beterbiev or Better Beef, however you want to pronounce it. People pronounce it a little differently, and I haven't heard it. I haven't heard his name spoken, so I don't really know how to pronounce it. But so we'll say Arthur is 19-0 with 19 knockouts, and I'm going somewhere. Follow me with this. 5 of those knockouts were versus opponents who did not have a winning record. So we could say he's 14-0. And I'm creating a narrative. I'm not angling you. I'm creating a narrative why I say this, right? Now, you know and I know Arthur hits hard. We know this. But follow me with this narrative. So 5 of the fights are guys who didn't even have a winning record, right? So we know probably 2-3 fights after that, still fighting prospects, probably a long time. His last 3 fights were versus Joe Smith. Joe Smith got stopped by a guy who was 6-3. Brown got dropped repeatedly by older Pascal. And then we have Anthony Yarde. Anthony Yarde got stopped by Kovalev with a jab, pretty much. So we can conclude that Arthur Beterbiev power is overrated based on this narrative. I can start a narrative and I can start an argument that Beterbiev power is overrated. And if you're foolish enough to believe that, you're going to be knockout 20. How does this apply to Terence Crawford? Terence Crawford has a 100% knockout ratio at 147. Now, we can say, oh, he didn't fight nobody. Right? I heard the narratives. I've heard he brought a bunch of guys up from 140. Untrue. I think they both equally fought the same amount of guys who moved up from 140. If not, Terence Crawford fought less. He didn't fight nobody. Well, that's not true. These guys were contenders and ranked opponents. They got 2 opponents that's the same guys, right? But they'll tell you, well, they also were different. Now, mind you, both of these guys have recently got on the internet and said, hey, Kell Brooks said I wasn't right with Errol Spence or Terence Crawford. I wasn't right with neither one of them. Sean Porter says, hey, man, I was the same Sean Porter. I just felt I had a better game plan than my father. He recently spoke out about that and broke it all the way down. But the narrative is he hasn't fought anybody. So the punching power is not real. So Derrick James marched his fighter in there. And became a statistic. Sometimes you got to believe what's in front of you. The guy's knocking everybody out. There's a reason these guys are falling over and the fights are getting stopped. There's a reason for this. You cannot prepare your fighter for a narrative, especially a negative narrative. If anything, you would like to prepare your fighter for who the fighter could possibly be on that night, for the better version of the fighter. Errol Spence throws a lot of jabs. He works really well behind the jab. We've heard the jab, the jab, the jab, the jab. The jab is probably the most underrated punch in boxing, but it has to be the most overrated punch leading into this fight, just the whole narrative around it. So what do? Some people make things up. At this channel, I look things up. I look it up. And I realize, throughout their career, Errol Spence lands about 0.3 jabs per round more than Terence Crawford. That's it. And Terence Crawford has a higher connect percentage with his jab. So if Errol Spence's jab is amazing, then Terence Crawford's jab is equally amazing. In their last 6 fights, Terence Crawford has actually been out-jabbing Errol Spence. Well, not out-jabbing, but out-landing. So the jab was not going to be the determining factor, at least from Errol Spence's point of view. Because if that's his main weapon, if we look at even just the CompuBox, it's already nullified. Because Terence Crawford is jabbing at a higher connect percentage, and he's landing the same amount. So it's going to be hard to set things up behind a jab. Then you hear Errol Spence say, I'm more fundamentally sound and my defense is better. So we looked that up. And you realize that Terence Crawford gets hit less than Errol Spence. His opponent's connect percentage is lower. Total opponent power percentage is lower. His plus and minus is higher than Errol Spence. Statistically, he leads Errol Spence in almost every category other than the amount of punches thrown and amount of punches landed. And mind you, Errol Spence lands at a lower rate. So, defensively, he's better. Offensively, he's better. As far as the power go, it looks like either he hits harder or he's a better puncher, meaning he's better at setting up his power punches to get the guy out of there. Even the numbers tell you this is going to be a problem. The numbers tell you this is going to be a wash. The narrative is that Terence Crawford gets hit a lot. And a lot of people say this. The narrative is that he starts slow. And a lot of people say this. Most counterpunchers do start slow, but that doesn't mean they're losing rounds. That just means that they're neutralizing what their opponents do, and they're collecting data before they get more aggressive. So we got that. That leads us into just a more stylistic approach. So how do their styles line up? As I explained, Errol Spence throwing a whole bunch of punches and spamming that jab, that could be a very good thing. But you cannot throw a whole bunch of punches and be defensively sound when there's a counterpuncher standing across you in the ring. It's impossible. Every time you throw a punch, just visualize it. Every time you throw a punch, you're open. You're open. Your hands that we're using to protect you are now on offense, and they're creating the opening. You throw so many jabs, but you're barely landing these jabs. You're landing them at a low percentage. So when you do the math on it, Errol Spence is open about 15 times per round. That's 180 times per fight. 180 openings. Errol Spence leaves himself from missing jabs. That's just from spamming jabs, statistically. These are the numbers. Right? How many of them do you think Terence Crawford is going to capitalize on? Don't take many. So when you look at how bad the fight looked, you have to understand this is what the numbers are saying. Once you know how to read the numbers, it tells you a lot. We ain't even at the eye test. We at the numbers still. Errol Spence was gonna have to do something differently this fight, and he didn't understand it. He said he's gonna break Terence Crawford's will. Now this is just opinion based, but many people, including Sean Porter, was like Terence Crawford is extremely stubborn. Bob Arum said he's stubborn. They said he's stubborn in negotiations. So one thing we know about this guy is breaking his will is probably not going to happen. This guy, you would have to knock him out or have the ref stop it. But you think you'll hit him a couple times, he's just going to stand there and stop trying to win. That's not Terence Crawford. They tell a story about him trying to throw a football 60 yards. And it sounded like it took him hours or at least 30 minutes. Because Sean Porter said he went in the house. He got tired, went in the house, and came back out. And then it finally was like, okay, that's 60 yards. This is the guy we're dealing with. Super competitive, super stubborn, in a good way. Breaking someone's will is not a game plan. So when I heard Derrick James say this, I cringed. When I heard Derrick James say Errol Spence don't have a style, his style is breaking eyes and breaking bones, I cringed. That's not a game plan. Errol Spence does have power. Everybody has said it that's faced him. However, you're not knocking everybody out. So if you're not knocking everybody out, then your game plan cannot be to knock someone out. Because you're going to the final bell quite a bit. So what was your game plan? You're going to come in stepping, spamming jabs, moving forward against a counterpuncher. Also against a counterpuncher who has good feet and good lateral movement. A guy who has quicker hands than you. A guy who has a 100% knockout rate at that weight class. Good luck. It's documented on my page that I said no version of Errol Spence I've seen would go 10 rounds with any version of Terence Crawford I've seen in 147. Documented. Right? This is not Monday night quarterbacking. So I knew this would be a pretty one-sided fight. And the notion that people thought it could be something else was wrong. Either I was going to be wrong or you was going to be wrong. Either the narrative was going to be true or the facts were going to be true. Right? Or the narrative versus the numbers. But there was no way that Errol Spence was going to come out and pressure Terence Crawford and body shot him and hit him to the head and bewilder him with the jab in round 2. And then Terence Crawford was going to come out countering the jab and moving and nullifying the jab in round 3. And then in round 4, Errol Spence was going to come back out to pressure Terence Crawford. And then he's going to be bewildered again. There was no way that was going to happen. The fight was going to look like it was going to look. It was going to be a one-sided ass whooping. Because it's the only thing it could have been. Either Errol Spence was going to impose his will. Remember he said that? Or Terence Crawford was going to impose his. But that was the only options. So that's why the fight looked like the fight. Errol Spence didn't have any advantages coming into the fight. His one advantage was he's bigger and stronger. Bigger, we know for a fact. Stronger, there's no way of measuring that. We know Terence Crawford has a wrestling background. We know what Terence Crawford did to guys like Jeff Horn, who was strong. If he wasn't nothing else, he was strong. He did not look strong versus Terence Crawford. We know what he did to guys like Sean Porter, who was strong. If he was nothing else, he was strong. Again, seeing him deadlift 400 pounds, all this stuff. So we knew Terence Crawford was strong. The question is, was Errol Spence stronger? And we knew round 2 that wasn't true. He stood no chance. This is what pound for pound means. And I thought we all agreed on this. Derrick James. Derrick James believed all the hype, man. Derrick James is a horrible trainer. Coach, whatever you want to call it. He's horrible. I'm talking about the entire time Spence getting his ass kicked, he talking about this jab. He did the same thing with Frank Martin. Get behind your jab, step to the side. Like, y'all, I didn't even see y'all work on that. One of the many things that people say about Errol Spence, like, man, he trains the way he fights. He punches the mitts the way he throws punches in the fight. he punches the bag, the way he throws punches in the fights. Because most people, they're doing all these fancy combinations on the mitts. You'll see Adrian Broner throw 100 punches on the mitts and get in there and throw 12 punches in a fight. But Errol Spence does everything the same way. He is a creature of habit. And because of that, he was thoroughly game planned against. Their James got out coached. Bo Mack needs his credit. They knew Errol Spence had a good jab. Again, I thought that wasn't even going to be an issue, but they made an adjustment anyway with the power jab. They made an adjustment that didn't need to be made. And my one critique of Terence Crawford and Bo Mack is, if y'all had this power jab this whole entire time, why did y'all ever use the other one? Why did you use the flick jab? I'm baffled by that. If you had this in your pocket, why did you use the other one? And then Terence Crawford, just for shits and giggles, realizes, hey man, I got a defensive hole that I need to make up with as well. So I already then added something to my offensive arsenal. It's like a video game, and you get some extra points, and you buy a new skill. You know, he already bought the power jab, and he realized, damn, I got enough points to fix my armor too. Then he decides, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna catch and shoot the whole fight. Because Terence Crawford had a bad tendency of he would be in the high guard, and he's looking to counter. So what he would do is he would abandon his guard, weave back, and attempt to counter. And he got hit by Mean Machine doing that. Not this fight. Kept his hands at home. It's a short on my video. Check it out. On my page, check it out. But kept his hands at home. So this dude upgraded from an already superior position. This fight was a massacre on paper. Okay? If we look at the eye test, common opponents and everything, one guy was clearly better than the other. If we look at the knockout ratio at the weight class, one guy was clearly better than the other. One guy has always been faster than the other. He has more lateral movement than the other. His defense is better than the other. His offense is better than the other. And then we get the fight, and you think something wrong with Errol Spence. I'm out, man.